Before I get into this Wednesday show, I kind of wanted to make a little bit of an announcement. And the announcement is that scheduling a twice a week show is pretty tough. Does that mean I'm going to stop doing 2 shows a week? It does not. So for those of you who are like, oh, thank God he's only going to do 1. No, there will still be 2 shows. But coordinating with a co-host, aka Johnny Shortsleeve, every week is a little difficult because he has a real job, I have a real job, and it's hard to kind of get together and make our schedules sync up. So here's what we're going to do. I am bringing back, not for a limited time, but for the foreseeable future, the Word of the Week shows. I got a lot of feedback when I stopped doing them that people really miss them and they really enjoy them. And that's kind of what they tuned in and listened for every single week. So here's what we're going to do. Every other week, I'm going to do a Walt Disney World Word of the Week show on Wednesday. That's a lot of W's. And then every other week that isn't a Word of the Week show, that's hard to kind of explain, we are going to do an It's a Food World show with me and my co-host, Johnny Shortsleeve. Got it? Got it? Good. Okay. So this week will be a Word of the Week show, and this is the only time I'm going to announce this and get into it and explain it, and you've got it. I know it. Okay. So here we go. The return of the Walt Disney World Word of the Week is happening right now.
From the Ear to There Travel Studio, this is the Ear to There Disney Podcast.
The Ear to There Podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Ear to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the return of the Ear to There Disney Podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I, of course, am your host, Phil Gramlich. I am also the owner and the operator of Ear to There Travel, which is a Disney-specialized travel agency. You can find everything that I do, including this podcast, the blog, or request a free, no-obligation quote over at eartotheretravel.com. All right, let's get right into it. This week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week is brought to you by the letter A. A for animatronic. And to be honest, I can't believe I've never done this episode before. How many of these did I record? And I didn't record an animatronic episode. All right, so let's talk all about the history of audio animatronics in the Disney company. Now, I've told this story before on the podcast on a different episode, but I'm going to tell it again because it kind of really goes into and it lines up with the history of animatronics, audio animatronics, I should say, and Walt Disney. So in 1949, not 1939, when the Hollywood Tower of Terror was struck by lightning, but 1949, Walt Disney went on a European vacation with his family, with his wife Lillian and his 2 daughters, Sharon and Diane. And one day while out on his own in Paris going shopping, Walt found all of these little mechanical toys, these mechanical wind-up toys. And he brought them all back to his hotel room in a big bag and dumped them all on a table for his daughters to look at. And Walt was just fascinated by the movement and the complexity of these little things. And Diane Disney Miller once told the Walt Disney Family Museum, which she, by the way, helped design and build, she said that she believed that that day, these little toys were the true inspiration for audio animatronics in the parks. So that's 1949, right? So that's in the back of Walt's mind. And over the years, he said that he tried to figure out how to use that technology, how to build something with that technology. So then in the 1950s, they take another vacation to New Orleans, which, by the way, was Walt's favorite American city. So he goes on another shopping trip and he finds a mechanical singing bird in a cage. And he was just fascinated by this thing. He bought it. He tried to figure out how it worked. He couldn't. He took it back to the studio and he gave it to Wathel Rogers. And he said, listen, Wathel, take this thing apart, figure it out, let me know how it works. So Walt was hooked and he really wanted to do something. So he brought in Buddy Ebsen, who would later go on to be known as Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. So Buddy was known around Hollywood as a dancer. So Walt Disney brought him in and he asked him to go on stage and do a dance for Walt and his animators. It's actually often said that Buddy was one of the inspirations behind Mickey Mouse dancing in his early cartoons. So Walt said, yeah, just go up there on stage and dance around and we're going to have some people photograph you. So Buddy noticed in the back of the room, they had a little wooden figurine that was attached to all these cables and pulleys. And that as he moved, the animators would kind of move that figure around, mimicking his dance moves. Now, later on, this became known as the Dancing Man. And you can see that in the Walt Disney One Man's Dream exhibit in Disney's Hollywood Studios. As a matter of fact, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before, and I forget who told me this, but one of the Imagineers that I spoke with told me that when they took that out of storage to install it and put it in place in One Man's Dream, it hadn't been out of storage for years and years. And there's still a plug, like an electrical plug that you can plug into the wall and kind of turn it on and give it power. And he said they were all too afraid to plug it in. No one wanted to mess that contraption or that figure, that first audio animatronic. No one wanted to mess that up. So as far as he knew, and as far as I know, it was never plugged in, but it still has the capability of being plugged in. I would love to plug that in just to see what happens. So Walt and his animators tinkered with it and tried to get it to work. It never really worked very well. And they kind of put it on the back burner, on the back shelf for a while with the invention, with the building of Disneyland. So once Disneyland was up, it was running, and it was a success, Walt went back to that dancing man figure, and he went back to the concept of these audio animatronics and that bird that he had found in New Orleans. So, and again, this is a story I've told before, but it kind of fits in the timeline, so I'll retell it here. Walt and some Imagineers, or back as they were called then, the cast of WED, Walter Elias Disney, decided that they needed a new attraction for Adventureland. And they went back to that bird concept, and Walt thought it would be great to have a restaurant where the singing birds, like the bird in the cage that he had found in New Orleans, would entertain the diners in the restaurant. So I won't go into the whole story, but they figured out a way, after experimenting with hydraulics, with cams, with all different things, they devised a way that when a sound was played, the animatronic figure would move, and when the sound stopped, the figure would stop as well. The technology worked so well that they decided to scrap the restaurant idea altogether, because Walt wanted more people in and out of that theater to see the show. And they, of course, decided to make it the Enchanted Tiki Room, which opened in Disneyland in 1963. So that was the first real use of audio animatronics in the parks. Now, there was a guy named Robert Moses who came to the Disney studios in the early 1960s, and he caught a glimpse of an audio animatronic figure for President Lincoln. And he decided, hey, I have to have that audio animatronic. I need this Lincoln show at the World's Fair in 1964, 1965. So Walt agreed, even though it really wasn't working well at that point. It was a concept. He had members of WED working on it, but it didn't work really well. It had problems. One lady, and again, I told this before, but one lady said she sat down to watch the show and the Lincoln figure had a problem and shot hydraulic fluid all over this lady in the front row. She thought it was horrible. She thought it was a reenactment of the assassination of President Lincoln. It was not. It was a mistake. So Walt called in Bob Gurr, who you may know from this show for being on every week. He called in Bob and he said, Bob, this is a problem. We need to fix this audio animatronic figure. I want more movement. I want it to be more lifelike. I want it to be able to stand up and sit down. And I want half the parts in there. So what I love about Bob and his mind and how it works is he figured, okay, he took a look at the Lincoln figure and decided it would become an airplane fuselage. And when he looked at it in that way, he was able to take out half the parts, take out half the weight, make it move more lifelike. I mean, it was an incredible figure in 1964, 1965. It was a huge, huge success at the World's Fair. But many people didn't realize that the audio animatronics had been in use a year earlier in Disneyland in the Enchanted Tiki Room show. As a matter of fact, there was a Barker bird outside of the Tiki Room in Disneyland in 1963. So this was basically a carnival barker, or one of those people that would stand outside of a carnival with a microphone or a megaphone or one of those, those cone-shaped things from like the Toby Tyler movies, and would yell out to people passing by to come in and see the show. So the Barker bird in Disneyland in 1963 was so revolutionary and so amazing and so just crowd-stopping and head-turning that they had to move it from outside the attraction because it was causing a bottleneck in that part of Disneyland because everyone was stopping to watch it and to check it out. Remember, this is 1963. None of that stuff had never been done before. So while we take it for granted, we go see Enchanted Tiki Room or Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room these days, and we bring in our Dole Whips when we sit down. Back in 1963 and then 64, 65 at the World's Fair, this was tremendously incredible, groundbreaking technology. So after the huge success of the Enchanted Tiki Room and the enormous success of Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, then audio animatronics became huge parts everywhere in all of the Disney theme parks. Think of Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion, then back in Disneyland, America Sings, Country Bear Jamboree, Spaceship Earth, the Hall of Presidents, the American Adventure. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And now we have gone on to have just incredible advances in the technology for these audio animatronic figures. Just take a look at Mr. Potato Head from the Toy Story Mania attraction, or the Ursula animatronic for Under the Sea, Journey of the Little Mermaid. Or how about this one? The ones that blow me away, I think, the most currently in the parks are the ones on Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, the Dwarves, or the Dwarfs. Why is it different? It's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with an F, but when you talk about them, do you say dwarves with a V? I don't know. It's confusing. Anyway, those animatronics with their faces, which of course we first saw in Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin, with that just incredible Buzz Lightyear audio animatronic. And now we also have on Frozen Ever After with the Anna, Elsa, Kristoff with those animatronics. The faces are just amazing and they're lifelike, and it's, well, for lack of a better word, it's downright creepy, to be honest with you. I mean, it's amazing. I love it. But what are they going to think of next? I'm looking forward to the audio animatronics that we get in Toy Story Land, in Star Wars Land, or Star Wars Galaxy's Edge as it's known. What about in Marvel Land? I mean, there's going to be some really cool cutting edge things coming out in the next few years. And I, for one, cannot wait for the future of Disney's audio animatronics. And that is going to do it for the return of the Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I told a little bit of stories that I told before, but I think they were needed in there to kind of complete the story of the audio animatronics. And of course, I left some stuff out, like the advancement in the last 25 years with the A100 audio animatronics and more. But listen, I'm not Bob Gurr. I can't give full breakdowns on how they work. I can give a little history and tell you about how excited I am for the ones coming up. And that's kind of, I leave the expert stuff to the experts. Anyway, I hope you did enjoy this episode. And if you did, please just tell someone about it. Like I said, I'm going to be doing these not each and every week. That is a complete lie. Shame on me. Every other week. And look for the It's a Food World episodes on the alternate Wednesdays. Also, look out for the regular Ear to There Disney podcast on Mondays. So until next time, thank you again so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Have a great week. Goodbye.